All right, my babies. Today's video. Well, first, um, since yesterday or 2 days ago, I've been in a very stoic vibe, and I don't know. So, like I told you once that I'm writing a story, and every day kind of writes itself. And for a while, I've been looking at how my notes are kind of like are highlighting what's happening, which has kind of like made me feel a bit powerful, or maybe a bit kind of like I don't know. There's nothing for me to question anymore, which is kind of like, which is not supposed to be the case. But it seems like I kind of like at one point set enough things for me to like ask questions about, and I kept figuring things out maybe, or kept kind of like moving through with them, or just kind of like delving into the thoughts and the things that that I had in my mind, and slowly, not slowly, surely I started seeing patterns in how I actually like kind of move forward with stuff, and um, the notes that I take are becoming the kind of person that I am. So the cat just dropped the guitar. Okay, becoming the kind of person that I am right now, and so this is kind of like me reflecting on it, and it's just like very openly reflecting on it. I've been thinking about it today, or at the very least today, I was kind of like happy just looking at my thoughts and being very flowy. Uh, I don't know, those days that are just kind of like extended don't feel like I'm doing much, but a lot is happening. And I'm kind of like, I want to say vibing on it, but there's no energy up and down. There's kind of like this tranquility, this stoicness to it. But it's kind of like fun to kind of like realize how my reflections are becoming a part of the truth that I'm holding and moving forward with. And how at present I'm kind of excited for the future notes because at one point in time, 2 months ago, I kind of wrote them. I wrote them for the sake of considering them and kind of like dismantling a part of me that didn't understand them well. And yeah, knowledge is out there, right? Or just like the concept of the world exists whether you know about it or not. Let's look at it this way. Like nature, everything that happens in nature is already happening, but you either get close to it and you figure more stuff about it or you don't. And so it feels like knowledge is not something that you're adding to to yourself, right? It feels like it's a part of you that you dismantle in order to be able to observe these things. And it really is just fascinating how if you like dive a step forward in something, you're able to apply how you reach that step, not the step itself, but how you reached it. You're able to kind of like utilize it as the skill on other things. And since like the past kind of like month or so, I've been more focused on like evolving my skills when it comes to like building the platform. It's kind of like my exploration of actual like the technicalities of it have kind of like expanded my frame of thought, or at the very least like expanded how I see. I don't know, it's just jumping from like jumping from complete like beginner to an intermediate, I guess, and then from intermediate kind of like pushing enough barriers to feel comfortable enough, or at the very least like kind of like seeing your expansion again. Like it's a stoic way to approach things, and I'm very much kind of like still trying to understand or think trying to understand if it's worthy to contemplate this stuff or just kind of like trust the process. Yeah. Today's video is preaching the bee and the flowers. Preaching the bee and the flowers. So I figured the best I could do is kind of like explain what I understand about the relationship between the bees and the flowers and how basically I can. But anyways, I'm just gonna flow with what I know about the bees and the flowers and then see basically why I decided to write it down. But there's a like beautiful relationship between bees and flowers, and it was explained through like a short video about how a flower connected to the earth is kind of like negatively charged. And what happens with the bee is kind of because the bee is flapping its wings, so it's positively charged, right? And what happens is, or is it the other way around? I'm gonna pause and go search for it. All right, so yeah, so basically the movement of the bee and they basically of them flying in the air kind of like creates some form of friction between them and random particles, and it kind of like creates a positive charge. On the positive side is the flowers kind of like are negatively charged because they're connected to the ground. And what happens is the bee senses that. So what it does is it goes there, and when it drinks the nectar, what happens is the flower balances out. So the bee doesn't only see like the ultraviolet lights and all the good stuff in order for it to detect where the flowers are. It also senses the flowers that are still have nectar inside of them, which kind of like balance their positive charge. So their positive charge is attracted to the negative charge. And uh, fairly enough, man, I attributed that to like our personal movement and what we actually like attract, I guess, because effectively, if we're looking at how, let's go for the manifesty side of things. So the more you're, like I explained earlier, the more you kind of like dive into something, you're kind of like you're you're removing a part of yourself that was kind of like blocked on the information that already exists because the information already exists and we are kind of like part of this world, part of this life, so the information exists within us, right? Because that information makes sense and it makes sense in the world and probably makes sense to us because like everything that applies to nature applies to us as well, right? So like we're supposed to be familiar with all that stuff, but in a way, we kind of probably, I think maybe the ego, we could use the how we kind of like are constructed through our social norms eliminates the true connection that we have with nature. And in a way, anytime we connect with the natural laws, with nature itself, we kind of like detach from things that are hindering. You could always say the same for people that kind of like are spiritual because like the more in depth they enter spirituality, you kind of like see them slowly not acting the way people normally would, and that's because they're kind of like diluting the parts of themselves that were like indoctrinated. Yeah. But anyways, removing malice from the equation, right? Because sometimes we kind of like mold ourselves to be accepted, and sometimes we're molded to be liked and loved and all that shit. So like removing malice, let's just say like if you ever have a choice, you're gonna look at yourself and you're gonna look at yourself and be like, maybe this is something that allows me to move forward, but like where forward do you want to move? So you either keep your shit and then keep moving in that direction, or you kind of like decide to like dismantle them and explore different directions. And it feels like for us, anytime we're moving, and not moving as in walking for the purpose of like thought and allowing your mind to kind of like explore itself or something like this, but moving in terms of the actual direction that we're choosing, the vision that we have, the kind of like that idea that doesn't leave you alone, that kind of like thing that screams out, you have to do this. This is what makes life worth it, or something like this. And it's funny because like everyone else has that thing. And so, most of the time we just don't really give it attention or we don't focus on it, but it sticks with us for years and years and years. I know for myself, like a lot of what I'm doing right now is stuff that I wanted to do when I was like 16, 17. But I decided to just comply in the worst way possible. I complied. I'm a complete asshole about it, but I complied, right? It's like that person who does his chores but does his chores in a, I don't know, while breaking the fucking dishes or something. That was me. But so like the story of the bees and how kind of like when they actually meet the flower, like they balance each other out, and then the bee goes and kind of like in order for it, as it flies, it builds up its energy or its electricity or its electric charge in order for it to be able to kind of like see the next flower, and suddenly like the day is complete because then it kind of like collects enough nectar to go back. And that's basically the whole, like the journey is not really like perfect, but it's complete. And every single time you're kind of like moving in the direction of something, what happens is you kind of like build up the energy to notice these things, I guess. And when you grab them, it dies out. And I think that's where our energy levels kind of like you get excited for something the first day, the second day, but the third day you kind of don't. And that's because you're going to the same flower over and over again. And but like you have to give it time to build nectar, or at the very least, you have to kind of like go search for a different flower, and then eventually kind of like establish a certain flavor within yourself. Is this the flower that I want, or is this a better flower? And these preferences kind of like pop up as you explore them. And I feel that's a perfect way to explain, I don't know, to express how I saw such a relationship with how uh, us just moving towards the world, I guess, kind of allows us to recharge every single time we're moving towards a different part, and to understand when we need to move. It's when something kind of like stops feeling the way it did before. I'm gonna keep this for now because it's just it really just fits me explaining to myself how for the past 3 days I've been kind of like stoic about the current situation. It fits, and I think I'm just gonna circle it the way I do others and come back to it after a while just to see how far I've gotten when it comes to processing myself in terms of this as I explained it to you right now. It's a video.